$750,000 of that and let all the rest of the money expire. That money was allotted in 2016. My chief of staff and I attempted to kind of wake that back up because we were like, hey, can we have that other 4.2 million? We should have used it for a revale, we didn't. Unfortunately, it's not the case, so we're going out for grants and trying to figure out how we can do that before the state basically forces us into doing it. Sorry, I was going on and on about revale, but it's very important.
Yeah, you brought up St. Elizabeth. What you were saying about it should be paying taxes, and you're saying how it's going to finally get assessed.
Mm-hmm.
It's been empty from the last administration. Nothing was ever done. But also behind it, there's 6 or 7 homes that are at the hospital, and they're tax exempt, even though the hospital owns them. The reason they own them is because they put doctors in them. You talk about the doctors having offices and everything that the hospital owns, but they'd have to pay taxes. But those houses never did pay taxes.
So, I mean, that would be one valid reason for your...
Mayor, real quick, just so you know, I already told Ron that all 5 created equal. He's already suffering tonight. So,
All right.
Well, I just wanted to...
No, but I can address that specifically, because we looked into that 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
All of the houses they currently own, because we're looking at the hospital as well, so we looked at all the ancillary components. The houses that are vacant, we will assess and put back in the tax rolls. The houses that they're currently using for nursing students, which that's what they're using it for, they're considered like dormitory housing, so it falls under the School of Nursing. And then as far as why St. Elizabeth didn't go completely, like actually for profit, if you will, last year is they still had offices. They still had activity. So as of a couple months ago, we could deem that completely not use for the hospital.
Hey, one other thing I wanted to bring up to you, talking about 17 acres of development. Years ago, it was presented that somebody wanted to build a no-income or low-income housing project across from Kennedy School on Deerfield Drive East. A lot of the people in this room, because I were conducting meetings back then, were getting involved with it. We all came down to City Hall. There was probably about 200 people at City Hall there that were against it. We went out putting leaflets in people's mail and everything, and trying to get the North Utica people to show up to fight that, because we didn't want any subsidized living, housing, whatever terms that were used. Well, it got shot down. The contractor walked away from it, and the property's been vacant. Well, I took it one step further. I contacted the woman that owned the property, and I told them it's 9 3/4 acres of land. I had a thought. I was going to buy the property myself, and I got 2 other people that were willing to go in on it with me. And we were going to make a development up there. We wanted to put in a cul-de-sac and have like $300,000, $350,000 homes there to add to the city budget. As far as I know, for tax rolls, didn't budget. And it was a great idea. The 2 guys that were involved with me were behind it. We were going to hire a contractor, get together with the city, have a street built up in there, and have some 4-bed, 2.5 bath homes, good sized homes, probably 2,500 square foot.
So,
and bring them on patrol.
So can I address that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So I didn't want to kind of just start bringing up all kinds of vacant lots all over the place, but effectively what I have Chris Lawrence doing, Deputy Director of Urban and Economic Development, which I might add was not added to the budget, nor is funded by the general expenses or general revenues of the budget. We swapped that position for the pre-existing principal planner. But no, what he's doing is assessing every neighborhood Utica, using tax maps, satellite imagery, we're driving around, plots like that we used to, either, like the bean fields, for example, right? That was where I used to ride dirt bikes, so I was supposed to, but that was the case.
You're one of those kids.
Yeah, I was. With Terry Rizzo, John Rizzo. Right. So, point being, we're documenting all of these plots of land, and putting them all in kind of, a category of development state. Is there infrastructure? Are they dirty? Are they clean? Are they green? What's the zoning, et cetera? And internally, we're seeing, is this something that might be a good use to expand for residential? North Utica actually has a lot of plots of land that you could expand for residential if subdivided and incentivized with even like tax incremented financing. It doesn't pilot, right? Something that truly would benefit the municipality while it's being developed. Now, the other thing, everyone keeps saying that homes, it's too expensive to build new homes. There's two reasons that is. One, everyone's building giant houses, and the younger population is now, I don't want to say learning, but realize that you can exist in an 1,800 square foot home again. I grew up with two siblings in an 1,850 square foot house, 4 bedrooms and 1.5 baths, and it was perfectly fine, right? Some of my friends thought that was a big house. Now everything's got to be 2,500 square feet. That's part of the reason it's so expensive to build, because these houses are 2,500 square feet. The other thing is modular homes have become way more just prime as far as the quality. It's not the modular home in the 80s anymore. Even with the St. E's project, we're discussing bringing in not prefab or modular, I don't know what the current term is, but the homes that are no different than the stick-built house that LA Builders built for my parents in the 80s now. They're exactly the same houses you find in South Woods, but the newer modular homes, you could bring in an 1,800 square foot house, an 1,850 square foot house, partially built, and you can assemble it on site for much less than it is to stick build a house. They still have basements. They still have everything you could imagine. And it makes something like redeveloping the property you're talking about possible. It makes something like having actual single family homes going to St. E's possible. Now, St. E's is the talk right now, right? That is literally the most complicated problem we could solve in trying to build single family houses on. That is why we have our team looking at all of the property across the city that we could possibly subdivide and incentivize new builds. Because why not Utica? Why can't you build single family houses here? Question in the back. Actually, you've been trying to ask a question. I'll go next.
Historically, that St. E's owned. That was nonprofit St. E's, as I understood through the years.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing is, it's a huge campus that hospital is on for its time. But the thing is, those houses housed for the primary care program internships that came in the 70s.
Mhm.
And they had them coming in from all over the world, these students, to finish up to become a doctor, medical doctor, and they were living in those houses for years. So that was part of the reason why the houses too,
Yeah.
But it was very interesting how they ventured out and into this program. Sister Rose Vincent started that.
Yeah, and you know what? It was good for the neighborhood then.
Oh, excellent.
But I mean, this started, I bought my first house in South Utica in '04. So I was going to the South Utica neighborhood meetings for years, right? When I was a child, basically, as far as everyone's concerned. But this has been a discussion about St. E's since MDHS was formed. The second MDHS was as an umbrella. South Utica was talking about what's going to happen to St. E's because it just didn't seem like it was going to continue, right? Even, when compared to St. Luke's, but at this time, though, we have to figure out what to do with it. So, is anyone from this side of the town, really, some of you have been going to all the meetings, but who has been following the St. E's planning process at this point? All right, no, sorry. Okay. All Cool, because right now that public comment is open. And what that means is, because this is listen, it's your tax base too, just because you're in North Utica. This is in South Utica, it's gonna impact North Utica. It's a pretty big document, proposals are up there. If anyone has written input that you want to provide to that, that's open for 60 days, starting the 20th of March, whatever that ends up. I think it's May 6th or something like that. But I would really appreciate every constituent provide input in that, because the planning board has to read that input and has to take it into consideration. You know, one of my pieces of input for that process as just a simple constituent is going to be that I want the planning board to drastically reduce the amount of units or housing units that they're going to approve through this process on that site. Right now, it's like 252. It's insane, right? It should be lower. I'm also directly as mayor, but
Would that be subsidized or market value, those apartments, if they turn it into apartments? There is a school above it.
it is not planned or
I
constructed to
was
be
wondering
any type
about
of
that, because there is a
subsidized.
school nearby.
What would you want or not want subsidized housing,
Market.
considered the school is there?
Market,
Okay, yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Well,
Is there a timeline when, the Senate made a decision, or?
no, not at all. So this is how this works. The only reason for this is to at least, GEIS, Generic Environmental Impact Studies, and the seeker process takes a long time to complete, anywhere between a year and 2 years. So the whole point of this was to perform a generic environmental impact study and seeker for what the residents believe should be in their neighborhood if redeveloped. So the goal of this process is to put a bow on all that work that needs to be done for environmentals, for traffic, for social impacts, for any of the effects the neighborhood would have, very similar to any project that would have to happen, right? So what we're doing, hopefully by the end of this, what we'll have is the things we definitely want there, we'll pave the way for. So if money lines up with timing and lines up with a developer, they can just go do it. Okay, so if it's single family homes, they don't have to now do the 2-year study, they can just get it done. If it's mixed use on the front of Genesee Street, but it's a huge campus and they want homes behind that, just like every other neighborhood in South Utica, they can just go do that. But what we're not pre-approving is giant rows of block-style apartment complexes, right? That is not something that would lend itself contiguous to the neighborhood. What we're not pre-approving is a shoe factory or some you know what I mean? Like that's the case. Now, that doesn't preclude a developer coming in and saying, hey, we want to buy this. And we're going to go through seeker ourselves. It's going to take 2 years because we have the funding to do it. And we're going to try and get zoning changed and go through all that. Anyone's welcome to do that. But the idea is if we pre-approve and pave the way for something we do want there, then the city and private developers and private interests can start marketing that, including the hospital, so we can make something we want to happen there, path of least resistance, basically. Does that semi-answer your question? All right. I'm gonna go over here and then over here. All right.
So, I've continued to talk about income stream, which is something that is needed harshly in this community. With the construction of the Nexus Center, we've seen the hospitals, Mike can talk more about this than I could, with the creation of the bed tax and the monies that's created, because obviously more people are staying here, the county's collecting a little more. Is there an opportunity for the city to do something similar to that?
So this was in my budget presentation this year, something I've been working on just since getting in. So I was working on this with the county executive, just discussing it, saying, is there some way we can get a distribution of the bed tax? Because we were always told the city, because we said we didn't want it in 2016, 17, the council actually walked away from it. I thought they were crazy for that, but they did. It wasn't you, Joe. Yeah, it wasn't Joe. Yeah, I was there. I was council president. When the county originally instituted the bed tax, it was to pay for the note, if you will, on Nexus, which is a good way to do something, right? They didn't put more burden on the property tax or the other revenue sources. They said, if we're going to do this, we're going to make the dollars that come into the area pay for Netflix. Good idea. It was 2.5% at the time. Then they also increased it to 5%. Now, along the way, the city never went after this. Some of us were in the background saying, we gotta be going after this, we have to go after this. The conversation I was having with the county executive, which was, he was open to it because guess what? Our DPW and Parks Department is effectively maintaining a lot of the grounds in and around Nexus, the harbor, all the places where people are staying for these tournaments. We kind of flipped that this year. I said, that's nice, but we're gonna go ahead, and this is something that has to be approved by the state. We are actually going after a 2% bed tax, as a city bed tax. It does have to be approved by the state. So when you see the news on that, write to your assembly people, vote for the person who will vote for that for us. Because what that will do is, even if it only brings in $500,000-$600,000 right now, that will fund. Well, some people go, oh, what's that? I'm like, well, it's something, right? Yeah, exactly. That would fund a good portion of the Parks Department, which they're working already in and around this. That would reduce the burden on the property tax specifically. The other thing is, and I speak about this a lot, okay, that would be something that one, are any of you staying in the hotels in North Genesee Street? Might be doing something weird, right? No, probably not, right? It's all tourism. It's money that's coming in, right? Those are those tournaments, that's all that stuff coming in. If we put a bed tax on that, I talk to hockey parents, dance parents, lacrosse parents, all these tournaments. They're like, guess what? We don't even look. We stay where the location is. That's what we have. So it's indexed to the price though. It's a percentage. If we institute that, in 5 years from now, hotel room prices have inflated by 40%. Guess what also goes up by 40% without asking for it? The bed tax revenue, right? The biggest issue with local property tax across the board, whether you're elected, whether you're a constituent, across the board is it's genuinely the only tax that we pay that isn't indexed to everything else around us. It's fixed. It's fixed. So if the cost to maintain roads doubles, property tax stays fixed. If the cost to pay the police force goes up, the property tax stays fixed. If our health insurance, if the city's cost to run the city and maintain the services as they are now continues to go up, the property taxes just sit there fixed. Now that creates two problems, right? If they do need to go up, a person has to ask for that, which is why a lot of you are very aggravated with me. But then the legislative body has to work with that person to appropriately make sure that those funds are managed, right? Because we work together to pass a budget. I don't want to keep going back to property tax owners or property owners for taxes. I want to make sure that something like a bed tax gets instituted. That's going to really depend on the state. Now, the other thing is sales tax distribution. Years ago, there was a discussion that it was possible that if the mayor of Rome and the mayor of Utica met with the county executive, there was this proposal out there that supposedly we could garner more from the sales tax distribution. I don't know if it would be based on per capita or whatever they were going to do, but Mike Gentile and I, and actually in his role as county legislator, actually, specific to this district as well, I'm saying, hey, let's sit down, let's talk about that again. Now, if we go through that formula, and it's this short-term gain that's gonna really leave us at risk for losing revenue coming from sales tax, I'm not gonna be for it. But the reality is, the county executive and I are now having that conversation, because that's another thing, again, that's indexed to inflation. Okay, groceries, obviously you're not paying any sales tax. But look at cars. 4 years ago, a pickup truck was 40 grand. Now a pickup truck's 80 grand. Cars doubled. Sales tax doubled, right? We're not benefiting from that as much because we don't have as much retail, but that's also why we're going after retail quite a bit in this administration. All right, next question. Oh yeah, over here. Yeah.
I hate to go backwards.
Oh, you can, it's cool.
I was on the topic of the hospital only because, as an experience over these past few months, there was a time that the hospital had to turn away patients. And, I wanted to know what the concern of the city was that did happen, and if there was a contingency for the future where, for us to be able to avoid a situation like that. Should something, should allow to utilize the hospital?
So you're talking about when they announced they were on diversion.
Yeah.
That also affected the city. Because our EMS workers that would normally bring someone to our emergency room were forced to go to other emergency rooms outside the city. We were also forced into a situation where, along with a couple of the private ambulances, we had to start doing mandated transports. From what I understand, speaking with the hospital, and speaking, because we have conversations with them consistently, because if they're not bringing patients in quick enough, our ambulance will sit there for 3 hours. That keeps us from other calls. And the patient turnover, until that patient is turned over to the hospital, we're still in quote ownership of that like chain of custody. We can't leave. That takes firemen and EMS workers off the main line, and now that causes the increased replacement overtime. So it doesn't just impact healthcare, it impacts our bottom line taxes go too. So we're back to a 20 to 25-minute turnover, but you're right, during those times you're up to 3 hours. Luckily we have Oneida, we have Rome, we have other quote regional hospitals, but as far as this specific hospital, it was all about getting patients through the emergency room and into beds. And I know for a fact, because we met with them specifically, they increased and changed how their staffing management worked to get people through that process quicker. Because the capacity is the capacity right now. There's one emergency room with a certain amount of staff.
Give us an update on the harbor project.
Yes, we can. June 5th, there will be a grand opening. There will be bands and food and all kinds of stuff on the promenade, which will be great. Because the fences will be down, people can launch a kayak, launch a canoe, utilize the actual water, and that's really going to pave the way for more development. There are 2 hotels slated to start. The closing of that property has been very problematic because we're in a chicken and egg scenario where we have to dedicate a road that isn't built yet, and they're going to pay to build it. So we can't give them a road that they haven't built yet, and they can't give us a road they haven't built yet. But 2 hotels will be going up, which is why we're also going in for bed tax, because it'll be more hotels. That will be like to the back and to the right. There's also something that they should be breaking ground on this spring, which next to the 1933 building, a development was proposed, and the property has been, in acquisition for another building that will be built from scratch next to the 1933 building, which will be apartments and food and beverage. 1933 is planned to be a conference center. All of these things are based on the input we received in meeting with the World Hockey Tournament officials, either USA Hockey or IIHF, the box lacrosse tournaments. Every single tournament that comes here states that if we had 2 hotels and another conference center in the harbor, we wouldn't need to put people out of the casino. They want people here. So that's just going to expand the ability to bring in revenue to what you're concerned with, like that outside revenue. And also, July 3rd, is it, Mike?
Yeah.
Albany Symphony is going to have a symphony concert on the harbor. They received to do things along the harbor, or along the canal, for 200th anniversary, all the stuff that's going on. And they asked if they could come here July 3rd or 4th. We said, we're a big July 4th town, and all that stuff going on. So they picked the 3rd, but the Albany Symphony will also be performing on the harbor. So we have a lot of activity. As far as where we're going next with the harbor, there's all the land, if you're looking at looking to the west, the left. That was previously kind of envisioned as just big multi-use field, sports, etc. I'm working with the Harbor Point Board now to kind of re-envision that as retail. I don't see any reason why Utica, New York can't have sports tournaments, the hotels, the condos, the townhouses, and like retail outlets like Woodbury down towards the city. Sounds far-fetched, but it's not. We are bringing in hundreds of thousands of visitors who want to go to tournaments, stay in hotel rooms. And when I'm going somewhere, a dance, or we go to some baseball tournament or whatever, it's always, okay, we're in the hotel, we're at the competition, and then what are you doing else all the other time? We're going to some amenity in that town, or we're going shopping, right? You put retail in the harbor and pair it with everything else, that would be just a trifecta of sales tax, bed tax revenue. We would become a destination for more than just those things. It's in the future, but we have to set that hat now, otherwise we'll never get there.
You know, one of the things I mentioned about tournaments coming in, my son lives in Pittsburgh, and they do have quite a few hockey teams that come up here and play tournaments at the Nexus Center. They love the Nexus Center, think it's great and stuff. They have one complaint. Nothing to do around here once you're done with the tournament. There's no place for kids to go.
Right.
And I hope that's something that you're gonna be addressing.
So here's what's interesting. And this is messaging, this is Utica County Tourism. When the adult tournaments were here, Women's Worlds and the lacrosse championships, okay? They went to the zoo, they went to the museum. They asked about the gym, even though they were adults. They went bowling, even though we need another bowling alley. All right, they went to the movies, they went to our parks. Some of them went and played pickleball. Some of them went and did. So I guess what I'm outlining here is where you would bring kids. They all did it, and they wrote about it. They talked to the news about it. They went to brewery tours. Okay. They went to many of the different eating establishments, which is a bit of a cultural tour too. Okay, even though it's not something like that to do where you typically think of with a kid, but if I'm down south, I take my kids to a barbecue restaurant, right? That's another one of those things. So I think effectively, that is a huge complaint, and it's partly messaging, because when you're at Nexus, where is it? No one knows. Right, so we do need, better messaging through Utica County Tourism to point all those things out.
Tourism at the Nexus Center.
What's that?
I'd like to see tourism at the Nexus Center.
Tell your county legislator.
Cool talk.
Yeah, I'm just joking. What's up?
Remind us next this kind of
There's one here though.
How of a man?
Mike, you're talking about opening up 2 more hotels at the harbor.
Yes.
Right now, we have 9 hotels in a quarter-mile stretch of North Tennessee. And the big hotels, the newer hotels, find nothing wrong with them.
Okay.
But I think you ought to get together with your codes department and maybe serve some abatement notices to the poor that are at this end of the. Because every day in the Sentinel, there's all kinds of problems at these motels. Now it's on the news about the guy that had the guns and he was selling drugs and everything else. Maybe they could redesign the opening to the thruway if they took those other 2 motels out of.
So as part of the Pell study and the mandated throughway redesign, one of the hotels is slated for removal. If that goes through, but these things are far out, right? But it's part of the throughway redesign. It's part of the North Tennessee Street redesign.
It would also help
Right.
nature.
Well, that's the one that's on the chopping block. Those are all part of the current, when I got in, I met with the state, talking about throughway. I thought this was like 18 months out. They're like, oh no, 2029. I'm like, what? Yeah. So these things are far out there, but one, we are out there with codes. We can pull codes violations and show that we're bringing people in and doing what we're doing. Unfortunately, we're up against a revolving door of societal issues. It's not an excuse, but we ticket them, we pay the tickets, they get in compliance, they follow compliance, we're constantly chasing. But it is a problem because we don't have just a strip of hotels in North Tennessee Street that's of a certain type. You know, there's certain ones you tell them, don't stay there. Don't stay there. This don't do it. Yeah. And it would be nice to finally change that. But also, private investment changes that. It's possible that one of these hotel operators that is not exactly of high status will get an offer from a different hotel operator at some point, and it will be renovated, because the reality is all the buildings are, except for the one that hangs over the crit, all the buildings aren't necessarily bad. It's just they're operated by hotel operators that don't care, right? So if someone were to come in and renovate, it might be all right, but you need incentive to do that. So the more we bring in, the more incentive there'll be.
Sounds fine, you could put a Dave and Buster's in there you go, something for the kids.
Yes. No, we talk about like, oh, if we knock this down, if we knock this down. I say these things too all the time, but they're owned by private entities. And they're paying their taxes, and they're running a business, and we can't, as the government, just go and be like, you know what, we don't like you, so we're taking your stuff down. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword.
Change subject a little bit. Back last year, we had Mary Ann Butch on here, and we talked about the upcoming mandate to go to electric vehicles. And she talked about a conference that she had with highway superintendents, transportation directors for the school districts and everything, and what the cost was going to be. And that was sounded nice. I believe Utica had somebody at that meeting as well. What plans do we have going forward, looking at replacing our vehicles with electric vehicles if this mandate goes through and is held through?
There are no plans. No, I'm just the mayor here, but I'm deeply involved with this, one, because of the technology and just my interest in it, and the fact that we're gonna bankrupt everyone trying to do this. The infrastructure's not there yet. The buses, we'll talk specifically about buses, but I want to say something else. This year, I can't go out and purchase gas weed eaters for parks anymore. They're like, no, electric weed eaters. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? No, you just have to buy a special trailer you can hang 30 battery packs on. Like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Let's do that. That's the reality of it. The mandates were done purely with zero thought, whether you support technologies like EVs. I drive a Tesla, for example. I don't necessarily support this wide adoption at all. Not even necessarily. I think it's wrong. Private sector should be driving it right now. If someone wants to buy one, fine. But not buses specifically. My wife's a teacher at New York Mills, and they had the consultants come in and talk about it. Not only so diesel, and I did the comparison too, because this is affecting our bills.
Exactly.
Okay. Right now, someone who sells plows isn't allowed to sell diesel and gas plows unless they sell at least a certain amount of number of electric plows. So if they can't sell the electric plows, they're being forced to buy a $300 plow, let it sit on the lot, and then raise the price of all the other plows for us to buy a plow. It's totally insane. The buses, it's between $300,000 and $400,000 per bus. Okay, whereas a diesel or gas bus or a hybrid bus, for example, which would be a proper solution right now with current state technology, is between $125,000 and $175,000. If you want to have a bus garage of EV buses because of the size of the battery packs, forget about the fact that we don't have the amperage to charge them. Ignore the voltage problem. Ignore the amperage problem. The problem we're not considering is they're not allowed to be stored inside together because if one of them catches fire, they're all this isn't scare tactics. It's just the reality of it, right? Certain municipalities that have EV buses like this, they're being told you need a pit. Why do you need a pit? because if one catches fire, you have to push it into the pit, bury it, right? So the problem is, this is no different than the fluorescent light bulbs. Think back to when the government incentivized everyone to buy fluorescent light bulbs. Does anyone have fluorescent light bulbs left in their house, or are they using LEDs? Right? Got a few probably, right? But LEDs are the technology now. We were 2, maybe 3 years away from LEDs being completely ready for prime time. The government backed the wrong horse. Everyone bought fluorescents, and now the fluorescents went into every landfill in America full of mercury and created an environmental hazard that we can't even mitigate. Why? Because the government got behind some idiocy like electric buses. We shouldn't be doing it. So, as a mayor, I'm totally against it.
I want to bridge on that for a second.
All right.
Papa Marcy was forced to buy an electric plow. You can't park inside, it can't charge, and it takes 3 to 5 hours of charge. And you can't park inside, and you catch a fire, everything goes along with it. And the governor, Brian Staley was on the radio.
And the governor says too bad. We're going
So
to.
they ended up giving them a waiver because Marion got involved in rubber. Are we gonna see that here?
So we've already obtained a few waivers. We've actually gotten waivers for our plow suppliers to get out from under the hole, you've got a stock of plows. The other thing that I've been looking at, we actually came close to buying 2 a couple months ago, is used plows. Sounds crazy, but our current, we're running plows that are 40 years old. Okay, so if we pick up a couple of used plows that are already rigged, they're fine, they're from down south or Midwest, where they use different salt that doesn't rot the living crap out of the vehicles. We could pick up, instead of paying between 150 and 200 grand for a new plow, we could lower the age of our fleet by 20 years, spending $20,000 to $40,000 a plow. I'm launching those efforts with the budget director and the DPW now because I want to do that before these mandates create a situation where we're like not allowed to import some gas or diesel plow from like Tennessee to New York State, which I can see that thing too, right? Going back to the other thing you mentioned about Marcy, let me play devil's advocate for a second. All right, let's say battery technology is a situation where it can charge faster and it's not gonna set fire to an entire village if it catches fire. Typical plow overnight, right? We have 450 miles of kind of lanes to cover. We have 13 plows. Each plow only has to go between, in the worst case scenario, 80 to 100 miles a night, right? It's possible. Is it plausible? No, right? Can we afford it? Absolutely not. But that's the problem. The other thing I want everyone here to think about, though, and I spoke out against this last year, when we flip our ballots over, we vote on these ballot measures. It's my firm belief that the reason, the proposition on the ballot last year, which did pass, lifted the New York State Constitution limit on school boards and municipal school boards bonding, right? Why do you think they did that, right? Exactly. Because now we just created a situation where all of that debt does not have to be taken out by the state. It's on the schools. All right. We can't buy books. We can't friggin', renovate gyms for kids, and we can't open gyms. But now we're going to pave the way for billions of dollars to be borrowed and spent on plows. Plows that are only dirt plows, buses. And who pays the bonds? We do. Well, we're going to pay them regardless. But my point is, we have to really think deeper about these ballot measures. Because a lot of people didn't think about the fact that once you lift the credit limit of a, if the state comes down with an unfunded mandate to force school boards to buy electric buses, they will be forced with money to buy that. So that's where we are right now. Councilman Beatrice.
Yeah, you just explained, Mayor, I explained it, but I know you'll be project with the state on Incinerator Road.
Yes.
What's going on in the front part of,
On the front of the
yeah.
All right, so let me explain this from like kind of square one in last January. Which is real. That's real. That's crazy.
At 35, right?
So technically, it was $20 million fine that we were assessed, right? And it was up to $20 million of remediation costs. So It could have been up to 40 million, it was probably definitely gonna be between 30 and 35, but it could have been more, who knows? So what's going on there is, we are moving forward, Power Authority, putting a solar field in. Okay, that's part of the fact that we are not gonna have to be on the hook for 40 million. Now, that is not supposed to be anywhere near Leland Ave. That's supposed to be on the site of the dump. Plans I signed and approved are, you go past the Weaver property, okay? Then you go past 5 acres that I got them to say they would give us caps with no liability on to build potentially like a public safety training facility, right? If we need to move that one that's on Leland Ave or anything like that. Okay, so that's another 5 acres. Then you're at the dump site. That is where the 20 megawatt solar farm is supposed to go. Now, as far as what they're doing right now, I verified this with DEC and New York Power Authority, okay? That is the Weaver property. Now, part of the reason I had to deal with this last January was that we ignored this for 40 years. The DEC has been saying, hey, you gotta clean it up for 40 years. They started bringing in land capping fill and started doing the work to get this done last year. That's why there was all those trucks going in and out, all that stuff going on. Now, they did originally have the solar farm going all the way to Leland Ave. And then I went through it and said with my engineers, wait, look at the tax maps. It's not a property. One, we can't authorize it. Two, we don't want it there. Because originally I wanted that to be the 5 years so we can kind of, that they would give us back so that we can kind of make sure everything on Leland Ave will be all right. But what's going on right now is the DEC went in there. They're clear cutting the trees. And I don't know if they have worked with or gotten acknowledgement from, but they literally don't care from the Weaver family. But they're capping that land because they believe it's dirty. Yeah.
Mayor, Ron brought up a point to me the other day.
Well, it's suspect to be dirty because apparently people were just dumping there as well. So
Earlier tonight, Mr. Vincent brought up a point. He said it was by there every day. And there's big, the bark chips there.
I can explain that. So the reason for that is anything like they can't pull up the stumps.
Yeah, but he says they're taking it now.
They have to take them because if a tree grows on contaminated land, that tree is contaminated.
So they know they're taking them in.
Oh, yeah.
That they were taking them.
What are they doing with them, Mike?
Well, typically, like if you dig up dirt, there's some crazy dirt incinerator where they burn the dirt in Buffalo. I'm sure they're doing something. I don't know exactly what they're
Where
doing.
they think the oil is.
Yeah, exactly. I'm an engineer of many things. I don't know much about how they burn dirt. What I do know is they just burn it, and then they charge us billions of dollars to bring it to them.
One last question, because I don't have the answers for it. The end of Leland Ave, the old,
You're talking about Utica Alloys.
yeah, what's going on there?
Right, so that is suspected to be contaminated. I can't remember the 3-letter acronym that still owns it, but there's interest in redeveloping that. Before I had Chris Lawrence and Laura Cullen working on our team, they were actually members of the Edge team working on that on our behalf. We're basically lining up the remediation funds. This is part of what I kind of flipped. We're doing proactive remediation and site development so that things are ready to be done. That's currently being assessed by funds that are controlled by Edge. And we're going to figure out where the contamination is, if any. I'm assuming there is, but I'll say if any to be hopeful. Identify what needs to be done, identify the remediation costs, and then market it for development. And actually, we do have some interest in it. That's the sad part. If we were more proactive, say 5 years ago, 8 years ago, even 10 years ago with these sites and had them assessed and went after the funds that are always available, field assessment and the EPA grants to remediate sites, we'd already be marketing them for sale, ready to develop. So we got to get there with it.
We know who owns Utica Alloys right now.
I'm trying to, it's actually some kind of relation to what Utica Alloys was. It's like ESG, or I can't remember the name of the company.
3-letter acronym.
Yeah, that's yeah. Yes.
Mike, since you're talking about so many things tonight, which we really appreciate, can you tell us a little bit about this?
Is that the solar program?
This energy saving
So for years now, the city of Utica, the municipality, has contracted a specific rate for their power from solar fields. Now, obviously, it's like all math, right? It's like carbon accounting, it's energy. NIPA and National Grid know how much solar is coming into our grid, okay? And based on that, they can sell a certain amount of the solar to committed customers, guaranteeing a certain rate. It's the same thing for residents. We opened that up for residents. So if you sign up for that, you'll have a 10% discount based on how much solar is coming into from these specific solar farms, our grid. They account for that. If we get, I can't remember the exact number, it's something like between 300 and 400 subscribers signed up on this program. The city also gets credits to apply to other efficiency costs. Now, I'm not talking about just throwing solar panels on everything. We'll have credits towards no cost door renovation for the rec center, for example, because the doors need to be repaired, because they're leaky, because they're leaking like a sieve, energy efficiency wise. Those types of credits will be applied to that. It'll reduce the overall maintenance liability cost of the city if enough people sign up for it.
So how did you get a check?
So no, it's literally, if you sign up for that program, it'll come off your bill effectively. You'll have a different rate of electricity provided in your bill. So it'll actually be, it's almost like you can look at it like a discount, but really you're just getting a different rate. And that's how it works for the city is there's a certain percentage of the power we use that ends up associated with those contracts, so our rate is less. And not only is it less, it stays fixed. So like the city says, we're gonna pay this much for the next 3 years, for example. And even if grid goes up, power buying from those solar fields, if you will, stays the same. So it's a way to control the costs.
So do you have a lot of people signed up for it?
I think we're up to almost like somewhere between around like 250. We're getting there. If we get like 100 more, then we'll start to see like actual credit benefit from it to do other work in the city.
So what it does, they take X amount of pennies off the kilowatts that you use. Right?
Yes, but then indirectly, the way the city benefits from it is if we prove that we have enough people sign up for a program like that, whatever carbon credits they're getting end up getting distributed probably in some form to the city of Utica. That's how we see the revenue for the city as well.
One more thing.
Yeah.
What you mentioned about what's going on with the mayor's gala, so these people, if they don't know what's going on.
All right, so even though it was selected around the December timeframe, the mayor's gala will be happening May 31st, and it will be benefiting the Theobald House, which is now at the Sales Center, an organization that has underpinned support for single mothers and just families as a whole that are raising young children for 75 years in this area. They keep a very low profile, so they've never really participated in this before. We did just recently announce it because it is up to the beneficiary to both organize, kind of do all the legwork. This is how it's always been, and announce it as a benefit gala. So that's why we just announced it, but it'll be May 31st. Kind of similar format, but we're going to mix it up a little. Maybe have the lights a little darker, with a couple more amenities, maybe do an outside cigar bar or something, on one of the streets next to the sorry, I said the Radisson. I might as well have said the Sheridan. Delta Marriott, sorry, yeah. So, yeah, no, right, I'm getting tired here, but no, it's May 31st, it'll be phenomenal. It benefits an organization that really has not been able to
It's a
participate in something
wonderful
like this.
organization.
It's a wonderful organization. One of the things I'm going to have them do is make sure throughout the actual evening, throughout the whole facility, there will be, the easels, the video boards, everything about the organization, because they do so much for this area, and they don't ever ask for anything in return. So that's really why my wife and I wanted to select them. So it'll be fun.
All right, it's time.
Is it?
Yeah.
Time.
It's a nice.
Something off.
It's forever.
Yeah, I've been at this since 7 a.m. So it's all good. Well, thank you. And next time you have any question, whether it's crazy or not, I don't think any question's crazy. Call my office. My secretary Becky loves to field all kinds of calls, whether they're nice people or crazy people on the phone. We make sure we respond to all of them. The grants office, the city of Utica? What office is that?
Whatever. Bo had sent me paperwork on a grant that the city is offering for women in business.
Ah,
And I had some questions and I called. Do you remember what the guy's name was that I spoke to? I have it written down at home.
I'd love to know who you spoke to.
I just have simple questions because I don't have like an LLC. I don't have certain things in place, so I wanted to see if I was actually eligible.
Oh, she's talking about the,
I know exactly what you're talking about. But I'm wondering who answered. That's what I want to know.
you would talk to either Jack or Leah.
What's the other name?
Jack or Leah?
It was a guy, so it was.
Yeah, it was definitely Jack. We'll do it. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, 50/50.
Oh, yeah, thank you for this, by the way. I was just told you're doing the 50/50 for Mayor's Gallery. Is that what's going on? Is that happening? The appointments, yeah, exactly. So thank you. That's phenomenal.
All right,
Yeah.
here we go. Hello. 5, 1, 2, 7,
Can't hear you.
8.
We don't have it.
All right, everybody in unison, use the microphone. Okay, the 50/50 ticket is 5, 1, 2, 7, 6, 8.